the cause of suffering. And Buddha talked about 3 forms of craving, which is the cause. 3 forms of craving, which is the cause of suffering. And why do we crave? Now it's a question mark. Why do we crave? And therefore leads to cleaning and leads to action becoming and then suffering. Why do we crave? We crave because the Buddha says, whatever delightful and pleasurable things there are in the world, therein this craving finds it congenial to arise. Therein finds congenial to take roots. Now because there are pleasurable things in the world, there are pleasant things in the world, delightful things in the world, the Buddha says, that is why there is craving. So the Buddha goes into detail that the I in this world, delightful and pleasurable things, herein this craving takes place. I in this world, in other words, the I, the Buddha say, your I in this world is delightful and pleasurable things. And also the tongue in this world is delightful. So is the body, the mind. Then the Buddha goes into the form. Visible form in this world are delightful and pleasurable things. Why are they pleasurable and delightful? Because of our merits in the past. Because we have done a lot of merits in the past as well. And so there is our resultant. What we do, that we receive. We have this eye to see, and we can see pleasurable things, colors. We can see a lot of beautiful colors. We can see form, see shape. And so therefore craving arises. So Buddha explaining why craving arises, because of this form. So those who do not have such great merits will have less pleasurable things. But still, there are pleasurable things. Now what if they don't have pleasurable things? Then there is this craving for the next life. Now there are those who suffer, who do not have so much pleasurable things. They say maybe they are poor, illiterate, maybe they are deprived, they can't get a lot of things in this life, even though they work hard. So they crave for the next life. Probably crave in heaven, those who suffer, who do not have so much delightful objects, crave for the future life. So again, that is craving. There is another form of craving. Crave for pleasurable things in the next life or in the next world. Now then, Buddha goes through the taste, the body contacts, mental objects. That is why people dreams a lot. We like to dream what we can't have. We like to fantasize that we can have. Perhaps we think if I strike a first prize lottery, I can go around the world. So they have fantasize, they have fantasies that they could get at, that one day they may have what they long for. So they enjoy it in thinking. So in that way, thinking is a pleasurable thing. But on the other hand, of course, there are those thinking that are not so pleasurable, those who are suffering a lot. So the other 2 forms of craving, they cling on to a happy life in the future, or they cling on to annihilation. They will say that if only I could die, then I could be free from suffering. So these are the three forms of craving that arises. Even though there are pleasurable things, there are non-pleasurable things, still craving arises in the mind. Right? So, we'll go to why later on. Then, Buddha goes to the I consciousness. In the world is delightful and pleasurable things. The consciousness. Just as the blind people just love to see. They would give, if they have $1 million, they will say, I'll give $1 million in order that I can see. Or those who are deaf will say, I will give $1 million if I could hear, or smell, or taste, or touch. Now, it's because we have this thing. We don't see it of great value until we lose what we have. Then we could see the importance of being able to see. So therefore, the seeing is a pleasurable thing, the Buddha says. Eye consciousness, ear consciousness, nose consciousness, tongue consciousness. That is where there are people who always search for good food, right? Because tongue consciousness produce very nice taste. So they eat all types of food because of the tongue consciousness. And body consciousness, right? Like if we don't have aircon, we feel, oh my gosh, we need aircon, it's so hot. So if we have aircon, then we enjoy the body consciousness. We can meditate much better because the mind is delightful. Mind is comfortable if we have cool place to meditate on. Then the Buddha goes to contact in this world is delightful. Now contact, imagine that. We contact with pleasant things. Contact, we feel like listening to nice music, then we buy CD. Or we like to go hear opera singing, we attend the opera, opera music. Now, we go to the contact so that because it is pleasurable. Contact in seeing, smelling, tasting, touching. So we search for this thing and come into contact with this thing with the intention. Therefore, craving arises. Now you could see the Buddha goes into a great detail into all this. Feeling born of hearing, feeling born of smelling, feeling born of tasting, feeling born of bodily contact. So it goes into detail one by one, goes into the feelings. Now that is how we meditate, to note the feeling. Now these are all in our meditation. You know that feeling is pleasurable or displeasurable. So we develop mindfulness so that feeling does not lead to craving, which is the cause of suffering. So we practice detachment. So Buddha talk about the feeling. Buddha talk about the consciousness. Hearing, hearing, hearing. Smelling, smelling, smelling. Then we come back to rising, falling, rising, falling. So we practice detachment so that craving do not arise. Does not give rise to craving. And these are all in the Four Noble Truths. So when we meditate, we are practicing the Four Noble Truths. Feeling, mind, consciousness, body. This body is pleasurable, Buddha says. So we note the body. Painful feeling, non-painful feeling, numbness feeling. We note the body. And in that way, the detachment arises in our mind. Now there was this question that is always asked. Then Brother James, does it mean that we need to cut off the craving? We must avoid all the sense pleasure. There are three forms of craving. So we need to cut off all this craving. And I say it is difficult. If you force and cut it off, like, okay, I hear the Four Noble Truths, and therefore craving is the cause, I will not enjoy eating. I will not enjoy seeing. I will cut off hearing. But if you force the mind that is not ready for it, then it bounce back in greater intensity. And bounce back. It's like, for example, when I was in Penang, MBMC, and then they have a 10 days retreat. They go in and they practice very, very strong. Not to enjoy taste, not to see, seeing like not seeing, to avoid hearing, to avoid tasting, hearing, seeing, smelling. But after 10 days, before they leave the center, they are thinking of what food to eat. And then they start quarreling. I say, let's go and eat kway teow. The other say, no, lo ba is good. I say, no, we go Penang Aitam, the laksa is good. So before they leave the center, they are already quarreling among each other where to eat. What is nice to eat. So it bounces out. When you suppress it strongly, it bounces out. So you have to note the mind very strongly. It becomes doubly strong, triply strong when you suppress it. But if you practice gradually, by mindfulness of noting it, feeling, body feeling, seeing, thinking, hearing, just noting it. By just noting it, mindfulness, then the detachment, because you don't grasp on to the object, you don't cling on. By craving comes the cleaning, comes the action. So in other words, slowly, it does not produce cleaning, because you are mindful. Even if you crave to enjoy food, but if you don't cling to the food, you say, I must eat this food again, otherwise I die. And you go back to the shop expecting the same taste. If it doesn't produce the same taste, then you get angry. That is called cleaning. Why last time I eat this food so nice? Now this food not nice. What, man? This cook must have changed cook already. Or this cook must be Tao Hong already. In a bad mood. Produce this food like that. Right? Or it comes out, the noodle is not cooked. It's still very hard. And you get very angry. Because you expect. You cling on to the taste. Pleasant taste. And if you don't have that pleasant taste, comes lamentation, pain, grief, despair. And you get annoyed, dissatisfied, angry. That is cleaning. But with this meditation that we are doing, it becomes gradual. If you have, you have. If you don't have, it is also alright. So your mind starts to change. Your habitual mind starts to change. You become easily satisfied. You become easily contented. And gradually, without you noticing it, by gradually, our craving becomes less intensity, cleaning falls off, become weakened. So when there is no cleaning, there is no karma formation, you do not perform physical action, verbal action, then does not give birth to lamentation, pain, grief, despair. Now that is how craving is cut off. By way of our practice. Gradual. You do not at once chop it off. It is not possible unless your parami is developed, then perfection. Like the Bodhisattva. He goes through Dhammanupassana. And he realized that craving is the cause of this suffering. And he cut it off. He chopped it off. And the moment he chopped it off, he let go. Totally let go. Bodhisattva becomes the Sammasambuddha. Becomes fully enlightened. Because he's able to chop off of his parami. He has perfected the 10 paramis. So when he realized that craving is the cause, he chopped it off. He releases all the 3 forms of craving and he became the Sammasambuddha. But if there are those without the parami, One chop cannot, 1,000 chop also cannot. Because the root is so strong. Our 3 roots, greed, hatred, delusion, is so strong. And you're probably having a small knife only. So you need to have a saw, to slowly saw it, to kill the roots of craving, the 3 forms of craving. And it has brought us from life to life and life. We have been born billions of times. Which the Buddha says, if the bones of these beings were not to decay, were piled up together, then it is as higher than Mount Meru. Mount Meru is a great mountain, invisible mountain, the Deva world. It is bigger than Mount Everest, but our bones piled up together is bigger than Mount Meru, bigger than Mount Everest. So imagine how many times we have died and be reborn again and again and again and again. Countless time. Why is it so? Because craving brings so much joy to us. Because craving is so delightful, is so pleasurable. That's why it leads to cleaning. That's why we want again and again to be reborn. Because we are not satisfied with the enjoyment. So we need to enjoy eternally in the future, in the heaven, in the Brahma world, for a long time, as long as possible. So that is where craving arises, because it is so delightful. Craving gives us a lot of joy. When we crave for certain food, and when we taste the food, it gives us so much happiness, worldly happiness. When we listen to very nice music, give us so much happiness. Even so, is seeing something pleasant, delightful, your loved ones, your children, seeing your property. If you have a nice house with a nice garden, you look at that, it gives you so much joy and happiness. Cleaning. So, the Buddha says, it is so delightful. That is why. But we do it the gentle way. We do it the gradual way. Every time we sit and note, every noting we have, supposing if we need 1,000,000 noting to be enlightened, so every noting counts. Every time you note, there is 1 mark for you. Until you reach 1,000,000 mark, then you're enlightened. Because when mindfulness arises, the detachment, mental states become strong. Detachment. So automatic in our mind. You want to chop it at once. Not so easy unless you already have the paramis. You have in the past life been practicing, been training in meditation the right way, of course. You build up your paramis. And these are the people who progress very fast in their meditation into insight knowledges. So, perception, then the Buddha goes to perception. Sanya. Perception is pleasurable. That is why in the 5 aggregates, we have the perception. We have perception as well. We got to note this perception, that we perceive things. They are pleasurable. Perceived by way of external object, 5 external objects, and 1 internal object. And the perception internal objects is past, present, and future. And they are so pleasurable, the Buddha says. Perception. When you perceive something delightful, gives you a lot of joy. And so we cling on to our memories. Pleasant memories. But if you cling on to unpleasant memories, then another type of craving arises. But if you cling on to the pleasant memories, then the craving on the senses arises. So there is these 3 forms of craving. If you crave, if it's a pleasant object, still you crave. Unpleasant object, still you crave. Neither pleasant nor unpleasant object still you crave. So just imagine that. And the only way is mindfulness. Only way to get out of this craving is to practice the four foundations of mindfulness. Is to practice what you do now. And those who do not practice the four foundations of mindfulness, there is no way out. There is no way out of suffering. They will go on from life to life to life, build up their paramis. One day start to practice the four foundations of mindfulness and perhaps get into insight. If they don't practice, they don't understand the three forms of craving, there's still no end. Whenever mind and body comes together, there is this growing, there is this old age, there is this decaying, there is this dying, and there is this death. Then he falls down again. Human world, all directly from the Deva world right down to the Peta world, Asura's world. So don't think that you are very safe. You go up Deva world, you fall down heavenly world. There is still the human world. Stop you. There's no stopping. All the way down. You spend there until you are broke already. It goes right down until you have to start making merits again. So only the Buddha teaches us the three forms of cravings. Which teaching teaches the three forms of craving and to let go the three forms of craving by developing mindfulness. Only the Buddha Dhamma. If one craves to go to heavenly world, he does a lot of dana, keep his sila strongly, even meditate, he can go to the Deva world, craving. I crave to be in the sixth Deva world and do a lot of wholesome things. Yes, you'll be born in the Deva world. But Buddha say it is suffering because it is impermanent. So it can fall down. So therefore it is suffering. It is suffering because it is aging. It is old age, disease and death. It is suffering. So that is where the Four Noble Truth is. Wherever you go, there is suffering. With mind and body, there is suffering. And talking about perception, that we have done that in the five aggregates. Perception is one of the five aggregates. We have to note dreaming, fantasizing. Then we have to know it is only perception. Perception changes all the time. Don't cling to perception. If you cling to perception, pleasant perception also is suffering because it is no longer there. Unpleasant perception also is suffering because it brings a lot of remorse in your mind. Once you think of a lot of things that you have done in the past which is not so good, brings a lot of suffering, remorse to your mind. Or you think of people hurting you, harming you in the past, then brings a lot of suffering to the mind. So mindful, perception, pleasurable perception, unpleasurable perception, neutral perception. So every time you notice, detachment arises in the mind. In Pali, we say, alobha citasikas. Lobha is craving, alobha is detachment. It arises in the mind. It becomes stronger and stronger every time you practice noting mindfulness. Because it must arise with mindfulness. Thought conception of mental object in this world is delightful and pleasurable. Herein, this craving by congenial to arise and take roots. Mental conception, vitakka, thinking. So we like to direct our mind to think of pleasant things. So that directing of mind is pleasant. So you see, Buddha covers everything in very detail. The cause of his arising of suffering. Why do we crave? Because all these things contribute to our craving. And all these things that contribute to our craving, we are practicing it in the four foundations of mindfulness. So that is the Four Noble Truths. When you're meditating, there is this Four Noble Truths. You see suffering in this mind and body. When the mind runs away, it doesn't stay there. You feel very agitated. You know it's suffering. You can't control your mind. You want it to stay there. It doesn't want to stay there. Neither is your body. It's so warm. You want it to be cold, but it can't be. Suffering. A lot of pain. A lot of itchiness. A lot of numbness. Cause of suffering is when you cling on to such objects. When the mind cannot detach from such objects. If the mind can be detached from such object, that is the escape from suffering, the Buddha says. When you're able to see feeling as feeling, it's only pain, it's only numbness, it's only itchiness. It is only feeling. Buddha says feeling in feeling. It is only mind, it is just thoughts. It's only thinking. When you're disturbed, when you're angry, when you're frustrated, when you're sad, disappointed, these are only thinking, they are thoughts. Conditioned to arise and ceases. They are nothing but mind in the mind. You can't control it. It arises and it ceases. Now if you are detached, taking it as an object, then you are free from the craving, which is the source of suffering. Then there's no more suffering, the Buddha says. Then suffering ceases. Every time you're able to detach your mind from the objects, mental object, physical object, body object, Dhamma object, suffering ceases. There is no cleaning. When there is no craving, there is no cleaning, there is no action becoming, there is no birth of lamentation, pain, grief, despair. There is a practice of Four Noble Truths. That is how you practice the Four Noble Truths. The Buddha said, when the Four Noble Truths clearly arises in my mind, I see suffering, I see the cause of suffering, I see the detachment from suffering, the ceasing of that craving, then I am free from birth. I am free from lamentation, pain, grief, despair. I am free from the rounds of suffering. When you can see the Four Noble Truths clearly in your mind. And how do you see it? When you practice your meditation, one day you start to see these Four Noble Truths manifesting in this mind and body, just like the Buddha. Buddha said, when it manifests to me, clearly these Four Noble Truths, clearly in my mind, then I know I have attained, then I know I am the Sammasambuddha. Then I know. So when you practice the four foundations of mindfulness, you are practicing this detachment from craving. Then the Buddha say, there's a lot, I will skip it. So you read from the books. There is some books available. I think Sister Shiming has photostat for the Sunday class. There's still 14 books available. I think it's $6 or $7. But it is just the direct Mahasatipatthana without commentary, so it's cheaper. It's cheaper because the comments at the back is all not printed. It's only printing what the Buddha discourse. So it is a smaller print, so it's cheaper. If you're interested, you see Sister Shiming after that. Buddha talk about the pondering of visible form, pondering of sound, which is the thinking, the conception of sound when the mind forms on the sound. This is pleasant sound. This is pleasant taste. This is pleasant seeing. So the conception. So that we are practicing on the six sense space. Internally, externally. We are practicing all that in the Dhammanupassana. Alright? But the Buddha again gives this discourse in detail. That it is the same thing that we practice. Now comes the cessation. The cessation of suffering. And the Buddha continue on with the cessation. So in other words, Buddhism is not a pessimistic religion or teachings. We don't call Buddhism a religion actually. It is reality. But a lot of other religion, they like to say that Buddhism is very pessimistic. Always talk about suffering. Alright? But it is not so, because Buddha talked about the cessation of suffering as well. And the way out of suffering, the Noble Eightfold Path, how to practice the Noble Eightfold Path, living to the end of suffering. Alright? So the cessation of suffering is actually, when suffering ceases, then it is Dhamma. Dhamma, which I'll explain later on what is Dhamma. Alright? And monks, what is the noble truth of the cessation of suffering? It is the fading away, the total fading away, the cessation of these very craving. It is the abandoning, forsaking, the liberation, the detachment from this craving. That is the cessation of suffering. So you may not know it. You may just sit there and rising, falling, but every moment you are doing the rising and falling and noting the rising and falling, you are building up the detachment mind. You are detached and watching the objects. The detachment from external object and internal objects. Because the Buddha experienced it himself. The reality, the freedom from this craving, Buddha realized himself. Not through concept, not through analysis, not through thinking, not through hope, fantasizing, no. Through direct experience. So therefore, the Buddha's teaching is talking about direct experience. Not by belief, no. You think you believe in Buddha, that will be the end of suffering? No, not by believing. Even the Buddha says to the monk, "Oh monks, do you just believe what I say? No, do not take my word for it. Practice it yourself and experience that reality. Don't take my word for it. Because it is no use just believing the Buddha. It's no use saying, I'm a Buddhist, but you're not practicing detachment. It's no use. You could never become enlightenment. But the use is, of course, you're born in the Deva world, but not the escape from suffering. And the Buddha is born to teach us the way out of suffering, not for the sake of Deva world. No. Because in the Deva world, it is temporary. There is still decay, old age, suffering, death. Then they are born again. But only in the Buddha Dhamma. Just remember that. Aim for the cessation of suffering. That is what the Buddha taught. Because the Buddha born for the cessation of suffering. Then the Buddha repeat. Delightful and pleasurable things here in this world, here in this craving, is effectively abandoned and make extinct. This very craving that produces the suffering is made extinct once you eliminate it by way of detachment. Once you away. Every time you are away, you are closer to Nibbana. Every time you are away, you are nearer and nearer to Nibbana, to the end of suffering. So meditation is so important. It's so important. Sila, Samadhi, Panya. Sila is morality as a base to establish the purity of mind. Sila brings you to the sixth Deva world. But it is the concentration that you need to develop for wisdom to arise. And when the wisdom arises, seeing the Four Noble Truths, cutting off, by way of cutting off, craving, in detachment, as you watch and watch, it becomes very clear. You could see suffering. You could see the cause of suffering. You could see the cessation of suffering. Alright? Then comes the Noble Eightfold Path. So we'll go through the Noble Eightfold Path one by one are in each lesson. Okay, we go more detail. I'll go in depth, more detail into what is samadhi, right understanding or right view in the next talk. Or I go to Dhamma first. I talk a little bit on what is this cessation of suffering. What is this Dhamma? Alright? Maybe I'll go into Dhamma, then I'll go to the Noble Eightfold Path. So any question for today?